So I didn't read a lot this summer, but I did read a little bit, so I thought I would do an overall summer wrap-up. The first book I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. We have one family who's very rich. The wife is like known in the community, she knows everyone else, and the father is a very prominent, successful lawyer. And then there's this other family that is just a mother and daughter, and the mother is this other family's maid, and she's also an artist. And then there's her daughter Pearl, who becomes very good friends with the other family's kids. She also starts to date one of the boys in the family, and the entire book is just kind of how these people intertwine with one another, and is also about the mother's backstory. And then the book is also about an adopted girl who kind of comes into play, and each family has different perspectives over what should be happening when the real mother comes back to get her daughter. I listened to this book on audiobook, on Scribd. I was very engrossed in the story when I was on, but I will say that once it was over, I don't know if I really have a lot to say about it. It's very much about identity and love and family bonds, kind of the difference between cultural bonds and how important culture can be. Like, just because you can give someone the best house over their head and the best food and the best clothes, it's kind of about how culture is still important, and you can't give them that if you don't come from the same culture. I thought it was really interesting, but I definitely wasn't blown away by the book. It wasn't something that stuck around in my head whenever I turned the book off, or that I just had to get back to it, or I just had to get back to reading it when I wasn't. So it was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars, but it definitely wasn't really for me. The next thing I read was Dirty Little Secret by Lilliana Hart. This book was about a woman who works in the morgue. She comes home to her small town after her parents die in some sort of mysterious car accident. She works with the sheriff in the town, who is her longtime best friend, and they kind of solve these murders that start happening together. There's also an author who comes to town because he wants to write about murders in a small town. And they kind of start a little love affair, her and the author. I really thought I would enjoy this because I kind of read it already on the Chapters app, which is like a visual novel app, but it just didn't really work for me in novel form. For starters, I'm really sick of these unlucky in love sort of protagonists. I see them all the time in like adult chick lit, and I just find it really annoying. The books really reminded me of the Stephanie Plum books by Janet Ivanovich, which I love. Like, I love those books, but it just felt like kind of a knockoff of it. Like the way she wrote about the town and the little quirks for every single character that came about, it just felt really, really familiar and cozy mystery sort of style. It was just a rush of her thoughts at any given point about every little thing. Usually very negative thoughts too, like not dark thoughts or anything, just negative about herself and about her surroundings, and like it was supposed to be negative in a quirky, like I'm so relatable way, but it was just annoying and kind of whiny, and I don't know, it got on my nerves after a while. And then like the relationship, I just wasn't really buying either. Like, it felt very much like a fling, and yet she was like, oh my god, I think I'm in love. So that didn't work for me either. And then the ending was incredibly rushed. It was like, boom, it's over, it's done, despite the fact that we've had like 300 pages of build up. It just happened so fast that it had no real impact. I gave this book a 2. Honestly, I don't even know if it deserves 2 stars, probably more like 1.5. I actually bought the first 3 books as a bundle on Kobo, but I really don't know if I'll be reading the next one. The next book I read was We Are the Ants by Shaun Hutchinson. This book is about a boy in high school who's just having a really tough time ever since his boyfriend committed suicide. He also happens to get abducted by aliens who decide that he is to determine the fate of the universe. He can either press a button and save the world, or by a certain date the world will just end. I really, really loved this book. I didn't think I was going to. I listened to this book on audiobook for the first 2/3, I'd say, and I wasn't really into it, which this is how I know that audiobooks just don't work for me. I didn't like this book really that much. It was fine. I was gonna give it like 3.5 stars, but then I decided to read the last 100 pages on an ebook form, and I just like nearly cried. The last third of the book was so good. I can't wait. I bought the book now. Oh crap, I could have been holding up the book. Here it is. I can't wait to read this book completely from front to back in physical form because I feel like I'm going to get so much more out of it. I loved all of the complex relationships that the main character has with pretty much everyone around him. His entire family just has a really interesting dynamic. He has a brother that he doesn't really get along with anymore, and a mom who works really, really hard, but he's kind of like lost respect for her because she doesn't go after anything that truly makes her happy in life. He's a grandma that I just like love their relationship so much. Like grandparent relationships just hit me right in the feels always. It kills me. And there was a really kind of sad storyline there. It also had a really complex relationship with the guy who is currently seen in the book, because it was very much a like emotionally abusive type of relationship, because the guy he's seen now is like the popular jock who doesn't really want to come out of the closet, but it's not even that he doesn't want to come out of the closet really, it's just that he's so ashamed of the main character in the book because he's like the dork who claims he was abducted by aliens and everyone picks on him for it. It's kind of interesting seeing the way the main character doesn't want to let go of that belief because he's kind of all he has in the moment. The only thing that kind of gives him a little bit of joy and kind of fills the hole that he has from his ex-boyfriend. I mean, of course there's like an exploration of grief and not understanding why someone would commit suicide or how you could have missed the signs. And then there's also the new boy in school who he has a really good connection with as well. I did feel like sometimes the story was spinning its wheels, but still, I loved this. It was such a good book, and yeah, I just can't wait to read it again, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Blinds by Adam Sternbergh. The Blinds is a place where criminals or anyone involved with a crime is sent. But once they're sent there, their memories are wiped. So they don't know if they were just a witness to a crime, if they committed a crime. They don't know anything about who they used to be. They go to this community and they just start over. The book is from the point of view of the sheriff in town. He's the only one who has his memory still intact because he took this assignment on. There has never been any problems in the entire time that this community has existed until all of a sudden there is a murder. I feel like I have really unsure opinion about this because at first, there were a lot of things that weren't perfect. It had a lot of flaws, but in the end, I just really enjoyed it. And I really didn't think I would. I really didn't think this was something that was up my alley, but I just found it a heck of a lot of fun. Relationships felt like they were extremely half-baked. It didn't really feel like any of these people really connected to each other at all, and because of that, I couldn't connect to their characters that much. Like, I didn't necessarily care about them as people, which is always the problem. There's definitely a lot of questions asked about memory, like how important memory is to who you are. It was very ridiculous in places, and some of the twists were super obvious and you'll see them coming. The pacing was also kind of weird. There was a lot of explanation in the last 10% of the book, and none of it made any sense. It was very clunkily given. But the last quarter of the book, or kind of the last bit before the explanation, was all action-packed and was really, really good. And honestly, the biggest thing I took away is that there was just like a lot of great one-liners and a lot of great moments. Great things that would make great scenes in a mini-series. I honestly think they should turn this into a mini-series, and I feel like they could make it better and fix the things that didn't work. I think overall it was really the atmosphere that I liked. It kind of reminded me of like a Stephen King book like The Stand, except like something I enjoyed. So yeah, it was a bit ridiculous and silly, but I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book is The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor. I feel like this has been going around BookTube a lot lately, but I'll give you a quick synopsis here anyways. This is about a group of kids who used to communicate to each other through little chalk figures that they would draw around town. There was a murder in the past when they were kids, and now in the future there are some other people dying, and those chalk men are making a reappearance. This felt very much like a cross between Stephen King and Leanne Moriarty's writing, where you had this like group of kids and all, you know, like the setup was very Stephen King, but the way it was written and kind of the interpersonal dynamics really felt more like Big Little Lies or The Husband Seeker by Leanne Moriarty, which I feel like made this better for me, because the thing about Stephen King is I love his premises and his setups, but I don't like the way he writes, but I love Leanne Moriarty, so this kind of worked more for me personally. There's a lot of threads and a lot of variables, and it was really hard to kind of keep track of everything because there were just so much going on in the past and in the present. I will say that because there's so much going on, it's harder to see where it's going, because you're like, how are all these threads gonna come together in the end? It's a very fucked up small town. Everyone in it is screwed up in their own way, so you kind of have to remember that going in. The one thing I will say, I can't talk about it too much because it's a huge spoiler, but the ending was not my favorite because it's something that's been done so many times before, and it's something I didn't see it coming because everything was so complicated, because there was so much going on that like I was constantly forgetting little details. But if this was a movie or something, I would have guessed it right away, because it's one of these things that anytime, how do I say this without being spoilery? There's just certain things that happen in thrillers and horror movies and stuff that like, if it's there, that's the twist. Like, it wasn't my favorite. The twist ruined it a little bit for me because it's just kind of cliche. It just wasn't my favorite, and I feel like it's been a little overhyped. And I gave this 3.5 stars. The next book is Trouble is a Friend of Mine by Stephanie Tromly. This book is really just about a girl and a boy who become friends and try to solve a mystery together. Except the girl didn't really want any part of this, and the guy is kind of the reason she's doing it, not because she has a crush on him or anything, but more just because he's kind of forcing his friendship upon her. Because this is like a high school set YA mystery, I really was expecting it to be pretty light and not that interesting, as bad as it sounds, but this was actually a lot darker and more real than I was expecting it to be. It has a very dark humor that mostly works, but can be a little distasteful at times. You know, I think that some of the jokes are kind of jokes you could have made 10, 15 years ago, but now you're just, you know better, and you just kind of go like, ooh, no. But it mostly works. I will say the tone shift doesn't always work, because like I said, it's dealing with some really serious topics and dark issues, but it's a very funny, lighthearted book, or at least the characters are very funny and quippy, and because of that, the tone shift doesn't always work, because it's hard to go from dark to light so easily. I will say though, like, I was laughing pretty frequently. There's a scene in here that I was literally crying. I was laughing so hard. I really, really enjoyed this book a lot more than I was expecting it to. It's very much like a gender-bent Veronica Mars, because, I mean, it's from the girl's perspective, but Digby, the character she's friends with, is very much like the quippy Veronica Mars type character. There's some cliched like girl hate in here, but I didn't find it that annoying. It was just, you know, I don't know why this is a staple in a lot of teenage books, but for some reason it is. There were some cliched school stereotypes, but I do find they use them in a meta way. The mystery was pretty easy to guess, but I was having so much fun I honestly didn't care. I'm really looking forward to the sequel of this. I already own it, and it's gonna be a hell of a lot of fun. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Wanderers by Meg Howrey. This book is about a group of 3 people who go on this simulated mission to Mars. It also alternates perspectives between these 3 astronauts' family members. I found that the language was very simple and blunt. Like, I'm so used to reading a lot of flowery books sometimes that having a book that was just so simple with its feelings was actually kind of refreshing. Not a lot happens in this book because so much of it is just taking place in one area. There's the lead up to their mission, and then there's their mission, and that's it. And they aren't doing a whole lot. It's mostly just inner thoughts. But somehow it truly did keep my interest, and I have no idea how. A lot of the characters were kind of unlikable, but they were interesting, and that's a big distinction and very important when having unlikable characters. I guess because they felt like more real characters. They were very willing to admit their flaws, which was nice. I will say that there were certain characters that I wish I had gotten more from, and I just didn't, which was kind of sad because like some of the perspectives didn't feel like they added a whole lot and were unnecessary. The pacing was kind of weird. The last third felt a bit off. Overall, I liked it. I won't be reading it again. I'll probably be unhauling it. I don't regret reading it at all, but I'm not sure if I would necessarily recommend it. It was a very interesting book, very philosophical, very much about identity and who you are and what matters most to you. And one of the most important things I would say about the book too is like you really feel kind of inspired by the space travel that they talk about. You really feel the awe that they're feeling at traveling to Mars. So yeah, that was really interesting. There was a weird detour too where one of the characters starts to question everything that's happening, if it's real or not, and that just felt kind of bizarre in the book. Overall, I gave it a 3.5, but I might knock that down to a 3. Those are all the non-smut books that I read this summer. I'm going to be doing a separate smut video because there's a lot to talk about. So I hope you'll watch that or my next video, and I hope you enjoyed this one. See you around. Bye.